Restoration of the historic courthouse is a landmark event, but it didn't come without controversy.
We're holding our breath. We have to see it because we've been disappointed so many times.
The dilemma? Restore the courthouse and keep it as a functioning agent of the law, or move the county seat to the west, where population centers are growing.
The courthouse is the anchor of Center Street and really the anchor of Fernandina Beach. Everything has always revolved around it. I think that's what's really wonderful about the renovation there. It's going to once again become a functioning county courthouse.
I think a courthouse in any community is a central point for people to gravitate to, a place that they can identify with, not necessarily their own, but a place that they can move out from. They know where it's a center. And in the case of this community, I think there was so much personal feeling and community spirit in the building that it is what the fabric of Fernandina Beach has been built around.
America's foremost architectural historian, Vincent Scully.
All human communities involve an intense interplay between the individual and the law. Without the law, there is no peace in the community and no freedom for the individual to live without fear. Architecture is the perfect image of that state of affairs.
Tucked in the northeast corner of Florida is Nassau County. Today, its population centers are Hilliard, Callahan, Briceville, Yulee, and on Amelia Island, historic Fernandina Beach. Today, the local economy is supported by diverse industries. The timber and pulp industry is anchored by Rayonier and Smurfit Stone Container. The modern offshore shrimping industry was born and bred here. It's still an integral part of the local economy.
Fernandina was to the shrimping industry what Detroit was to the automobile. It wasn't invented there, but most of the major developments and improvements occurred here. Proof of that was recorded in the courthouse.
The harbor and railroad serve the shipping industry. Tourism has been important since the area was first discovered by Northerners in the 1800s. While here, many tourists experience some of the local history and flavor. Florida's oldest operational lighthouse, Fort Clinch State Park, and the 55-block historic district of Fernandina Beach. Fernandina Beach, as it stands today, was first developed in the 19th century, primarily through the efforts of Florida's first U.S. Senator, David Yulee. Fernandina had the deepest natural harbor on the southeast coast, easily accessible to ships from Europe and the north. Yulee's vision and realization: build a railroad across Florida from Fernandina to Cedar Key. The Florida Railroad began operation in 1861. It not only opened trade and tourism to the west, but threw open the door to Fernandina's golden age near the end of the century.
We had as a community the golden era. It was when we were first discovered by so many people from the north. This was a land of opportunity. As we were discovering our identity in this golden era, where trade was an aspect of it, where tourism was an aspect of it, our self-governance was a vital aspect of it.
As part of his plan, Yulee also changed the focus of Fernandina Beach. Yulee's plan called for moving the center of town from what is now Old Town to its current location. It was an urban plan that allowed easier access to the deep harbor and created the traditional fabric of downtown Fernandina as it is today. A face-to-face place where citizens interact to form a hub of social gathering, creativity, business, and government. Vincent Scully, Yale University.
Architecture constructs its own model of reality within nature's implacable order. It is within that model that human beings live. They need it badly, and if it breaks down, they may well become insane.
Fernandina stands as a model for a national trend in building communities known as the New Urbanism, a venture away from suburban sprawl created by the accessibility of the automobile. And while the neighborhoods here have been preserved, that preservation has not gone without its bumps in the road. The ongoing conflict will forever lie between maintaining and honoring the old while welcoming the new. With the renovation of the historic courthouse, Fernandina will preserve its roots as a place where people interact every day, a community with easy access to culture and government and friendly chats with neighbors.
We interacted with people, and you had that common touch all the time. You see people, you know people, and it seemed as though my problem was their problem, and because of the interaction and conversations and reaction with people. And it was a very personable situation during that time, which we all benefited.
The buildings of Fernandina reflect its traditional urban plan, a plan in which architecture serves to weave the fabric of the community while defining its character. It's seen in residential homes, commercial structures, churches, and Fernandina's 3 public anchor buildings, the train depot, the post office, and the Nassau County Courthouse.
Truly, that building is a penultimate example of that. And literally, if you start at the foot of Center Street with the depot, and you come up just a little bit to the post office, and you come up across the street then to the courthouse, you've defined one of the truly unique qualities of this town, because these anchor buildings are right there on Center Street. They tell you who we are.
The Nassau County Courthouse. Its construction in 1891, during the height of the Golden Age, effectively completed the development of the Center Street downtown district.
We have our Christopher Wren cupola. That was something that within the ancient Roman context, anytime you had that dome, it was a seat of power, of authority. Well, right there's a visual clue that it's an important building. Well, if the orator, the speaker of truth, is to come out and address the masses, where's he going to do it? Not in a dark room somewhere, I don't think. He's going to want to come right out on a balcony that puts him right in the most advantageous position to greet the crowds. And architecturally, the building, the form of the building, was leading toward that ultimate function of it. But taking that a couple steps further, we're fortunate, and I don't know if you've realized this, that's a building with 2 fronts. We have the one that's on Center Street, and you have that wonderful, the campanile bell tower thrusting up in the center, perfect balance of Georgian style. Well, just round the corner, and you will see an absolutely perfect combination of Palladian aspects with the Georgian, the wonderful pediment, the Italianate curved window tops, the fabulous roof that's coming up, the hip roof. And another wonderful part of our visual mix, look at that roof sometime. Let your eyes stray right across the street. Look to the same style roof in tile on our post office. Swivel a little bit, and you're going to find a building of this century, of this part of this century, that has a similar roof. And an architect has been so sensitive, it was David Beer who designed the building I'm referring to, that he's created a kind of tripart rhythm right there. So our town is fortunate to not only have historically these buildings, but to have an awareness that what's new has got to fit in.
As the anchor building of the community, the historic courthouse has provided many memories for its citizens.
Well, to me, it was sacred, more or less, because
My dad, he thought highly of the courthouse also because he became American citizen in the United States, and we consider the courthouse as the institution, as the American institution, and stood for all your rights and freedoms of our nation.
There used to be a fish pond there and a little building, and I can just remember it was more or less like a park playing in it. And the biggest goldfish I think I'd ever seen was in there by the courthouse. And I just remember the courthouse as being there for everybody.
And then, of course, on election night, I mean, that was the place to be.
They had a great big chalkboard out there, and they'd put it out in front of the courthouse.
And people would stand out in the street and all around watching the tally go up. Yes, every election they did it.
And people would overflow out in the streets, sit around, talk, and have a big time. And this group would yell for their candidate when a big number was posted, and that group would care. And then you'd start seeing people with long faces and longer faces, and they'd walk off. And some of the diehards would stay there till the very last vote was posted. And it was an exciting time. I enjoyed that.
One day I was sitting on the porch and there was a pickup truck came up with flags flying all over it. And I didn't know what it was to start with, but he pulled up on the sidewalk. And there was one of our local fishermen here in town. And he was real mad. He's got this shotgun pointed right up in his neck.
He's a nice fella. He was just trying to prove a point. And we were all really kind of scared, not so much for us, but for him. We called the city SWAT team down. We could see them on the side of the building, and I was afraid they were going to shoot him.
Anyway, they finally got to him and talked him down, and they found out really the shotgun, it wasn't loaded. The county used to haul people upstairs that were disabled, and they had this fellow there on a drug charge, and he was in a wheelchair, and I think the county said, no, we're not going to haul, this is it, we're not going to do this anymore. I mean, you're just going to have to do something else. Now, I don't know whether this was in conjunction with wanting to move the courthouse or something, but anyway, the judge said, well, that's all right, said, just set my court up on 5th Street. So he had a pickup truck and got a big chair in the back of it and had a tent set up for the people to sit under and all. And for 2 days, which made national news, by the way, that holding court out there in the middle of the street. But he did that for 2 days. And instead of saying approach the bench, he said approach the pickup.
Over the years, the historic courthouse began to fall into various states of disrepair. Renovations, modifications, and additions were made, but not with the preservation of history in mind. An annex was built to increase capacity, but the style was plain and out of place next to the courthouse. The balcony was altered to the detriment of its function and visual appeal. The dilapidated bell tower was repaired and a clock was installed. Later, on the verge of collapse, the tower was repaired again, but with synthetic materials. An electric striker replaced the bell in the tower, detracting further from the original function and character of the building. After decades of standing majestically as the Grand Lady of downtown Fernandina Beach, the courthouse eventually began to show her age, giving way to the corrosive elements in the ocean air, the determination of the native termite population, and in some cases, just plain neglect.
All this material that has rotted over the years, the stretch, the swell, and the wood and all, as it tried to resist the action caused by water.
Absolute total disrepair. The window sashes falling apart and panes of windows about to fall out, roaches on the floor, doors that wouldn't close, locks that wouldn't lock. Just not in very good repair, in terrible bad shape.
By the mid-1990s, an atmosphere of controversy surrounded the courthouse. By this time, it was evident that the courthouse space was inadequate to meet the growing governmental needs of the expanding county. Not only was space an issue, but the century-old courthouse was in dire need of further renovation. Finally, in 1998, the courthouse was closed, and Nassau County government functions were moved to a site in Yulee.
I feel like crying. It was the end of something that had meant so much to me.
Sad, real sad, because I didn't think they'd ever open it up again. And I figured it's going to go down. And in time, the palm trees looked bad, and the outside of it began to look bad, and you just wondered what was happening to the inside. And I know the time before they started anything, I went in there was mold and things growing from the ceiling, and I just hated it because I knew it was going down fast.
But questions remained. What should be done with the historic courthouse? Should it be restored? And if so, how should it be done? Should it serve as a functioning courthouse? Should it be preserved historically? Should it expand into the bank building next door? Or with the county seat established in Yulee, should it serve as a museum? Or should it simply be razed, tearing the traditional fabric of the town to make way for a modern building or space to alleviate the growing parking problem?
Why would a county not want to preserve its historical icons? Why would you not? This is what this building looked like. Here are photographs going back to the 1900s, and here it is today, restored. To me, that's great.
The concern would be that you start losing reasons for shops that tend to cater to the local business to be there, or businesses that tend to cater to local people being there.
I think there's a certain amount of stability that's associated with any government building, and when you remove that, out of the downtown district, it loses some focus.
And I do what the people in the board ask me to do to manage a project, but as you ask me from just me as citizen of Nassau County, I think it should have been brought back to what it was and then preserved as a museum. That's just me, because that's the only way you're going to get it back to as close as you can.
In the end, a compromise was reached. The beloved historical courthouse would be restored to its original glory, and the governmental functions would be split between Yulee and Fernandina Beach.
When I took office, the plan for use of the building at the time was to actually take off the back of the building, add 16,000 square feet in the parking lot behind the building, and try to build 3 courtrooms and make it the total functioning courthouse for the county. In doing that, we'd have lost the historic nature of the building. It would have not functioned as a courthouse for very long before we'd have been in an emergency again to start finding space, splitting functions, and that just was counterproductive to anything we could do, plus losing the historic nature of the building. So there was that did not sit well with a lot of us, myself being one, but the citizens in Fernandina, of course, were afraid to lose the building. They thought they'd lose the county seat if they lost part of the court functions. So there was a huge battle that took place, but the battle wasn't just in '97. That battle had been going on since the '60s.
And I really think that we do need the courthouse restored because there's 17,000 people here. And I think that we owe it to them. We owe the service to them.
The reason that all of this is so vital is that, like many things, it's a piece of a much larger picture. And what I mean by that is quite simply, our county is too large to fit within the confines of a single historic building. Therefore, what we've done is focus aspects of the government within that building while recognizing that there is a need for broader county services, so that we have not forgotten the past. We're honoring it, but we're also looking forward to the future, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's what government is about.
In 2000, the restoration of the historic Nassau County Courthouse began, a monumental task to say the least, a testament to the heritage of craftsmanship and attention to detail, with some nods to modern function and technology, but a work of art, an education, a labor of love.
It's a very fine building that was worthy of saving, and I'm glad they set the money aside to take the approach they're doing, because it's being involved in the restoration part of it, which I've done a lot of restoration in Fernandina. So I take a lot amount of pride just to make sure that 100 years from now or 150 years from now, when it needs to go back in and be refurbished, they'll say, well, let's do it just like these guys did it, because you know, that's the way it needs to be done.
My immediate response was, it's going to be a nightmare, because I knew what we were up against. I knew what was going to be there when we got there. And sure enough, that's pretty much what it was, a lot of rotten wood and a lot of just neglect. It hadn't been painted really in probably 30 or 40 years from the way it looked.
It's quite a challenging project, and I'm sure it is to the people involved, because it's a mixing of the old and the new. It's trying to preserve something historically and also deal with the reality of today from a standpoint of use and function. So there's the question that keeps running with us, and as we keep working in here, is when are we restoring and when are we replicating, as well as where are we modernizing in order to accommodate the functionality of the structure. So it's a very delicate balance. Well, the clock tower was renovated over a period of time. I remember when there weren't clocks in all the faces, and unfortunately the repairs over the years through there were not structurally sufficient in terms of repairing such a proper way. And then due to the rot that occurred, recently there was no way we could restore that tower. That tower has been replicated. That is a metal structure at this time. I'm saddened by it, because I feel if, many years ago, if everybody did proper due diligence to the structure, maybe we could have preserved it. Other than the courtroom, this is what the courthouse is all about, the main entry, because it sets the impression to you when you enter the structure. You'll notice, if you can, and probably notice, there's old marks along the wall here. This is where the old drop ceiling used to be, which was done years later. What we have done is we have taken the ceiling back up to its original height.
As you walk in, you get a sense of place, because immediately, let's realize it, the sun's hot, it's beating in your back. You take a few steps up, suddenly you're shaded by this wonderful balcony that projects over. You look up, you see the cast iron capitals.
Another thing why you stand out here is the wonderful way they did to restore the old platform in the front of the second floor. Underneath that concrete there, wood will be placed in there just like the tongue and groove wood was of that period. So just like they're working on the columns on the sides where they're restoring them back, like I say, everything is being gone back and looked at with attention to detail.
You walk through that magnificent door, see that thick, wonderful wood, and suddenly you're surrounded, and with or without air conditioning, many degrees cooler, and you see the wainscoting, you see the wonderful detailed woodwork. We're an inventive group here, waste not, want not. There was a palmetto factory in town, and much of the old plaster that you see, actually, if you look at it carefully, has little shredded pieces of palmetto in it. Well, that's because that was created here in Fernandina, and it certainly is used in that wonderful grand central hall.
When you walk into the hallway now, it still looks 110 years old, but everything's shiny, everything's pretty, everything's in its place. We've redone it. And the fact that the old bell from the bell tower is in the hallway, and a huge 1,500-pound bell that was minted in 1889. We've got it mounted on a frame, and it sits there for everybody to look at. Also, we have our display cabinets that we put a lot of the old artifacts that we found in files, and also in the courthouse in different places. We've assembled those, and we put tags on those so people can see where they came from.
And as you progress almost immediately to your right, you see that marvelous old staircase.
The first thing you notice when you look at it is a very ornate staircase, that there's some hand carving detail on the newel posts. And then you look at the scroll work and the balusters and the way they're put together. And then you think about 100 years ago, and they didn't have, I don't even think they had probably electric power at the courthouse, let alone a skill saw or a lathe or a portable chop saw or whatever, or jigsaw. Everything was made by hand, or most everything was made by hand. And if it was done at a mill, it was probably done at some local mill run by water power or something like that. So, but if you look at the details on things, it must have taken hours and hours and hours to build that staircase. I build a lot of staircases now, and I just try to think about what it would be like to do that without the power tools that I use. And you're talking about quite a task. That wouldn't have been, it would be very, very skilled craftsmen who had probably learned the craft from their fathers and their fathers and whatever, what have you. But just the attention to detail on that staircase is very, very high. They really knew what they were doing. So, you know, I just have an appreciation for that.
Let's hit the landing. Let's go up the second flight. And suddenly, you're in this hallway that is so evocative of all the legal experiences that have happened over the year. We're back to the birth of democracy. We're back to the ancient Greeks, the Romans, our form of law, celebrated in a building that architecturally enhances the process.
People are very interested in what it's going to look like and what it did before. The proportions of a courtroom are kind of unique in its own right because of the majesty that is supposed to exist in that courtroom, and the presence that the judiciary and the different people that participate in the court operation need to project to the public. So as we did this room, we talked about it and we wanted it back as close to possible to being like it was when it first came about.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I think that to see how it was in the original days, and you think about the movies like To Kill a Mockingbird, and to me those are the real classic type situations that lawyers enjoy being involved in, and it has a whole different feeling when you go in and practice in a courtroom like that as opposed to the modern concept and the modern technology. You do trials in the old days, the air conditioner didn't work about half the time at best, and you go in there and the judge would actually raise the windows and you could hear the outside traffic and the birds, and it was really kind of unique.
This is not supposed to be a courtroom of just looks only, which means it should have all those amenities that judges and courts demand today, as well as the security issues and lighting and all those other things, protection to the podium.
Restorers took painstaking steps to be historically accurate when replacing broken windows with glass that matched the original at the time the courthouse was built.
The original glass is called it's a float glass, which is the way they made it. They floated big sheets of it and then cut it. That's why when you look at it, you see waves in it and imperfections. It's because of the way that laid while it was curing. And a lot of it had been replaced. I saved as much of it as I could because a lot of it was brittle, and when you're reglazing it, some of it just popped. But I discovered a company up in Indiana that actually duplicates the same process of that period glass. So if you go like upstairs, all the windows upstairs have the new glass in them. But if you put one piece of it next to the piece that was done in 1890, you're really not going to pick out any difference in it.
It takes about a whole day to do just to strip 2 windows, and then another day just to put them all back together the way they're supposed to be, and then another couple of days to do all the filling and sanding and painting and caulk and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of work. It's very, very tedious, meticulous work.
Everywhere you look are hints and memories, little areas where rainbow-colored glass glints out, where you look up and you see a tin ceiling or a marvelous plaster wall.
Here you can also notice that the woodwork is being cleansed of all the old shellac of varnishes or other finishes that were applied over the years. One of the more interesting things when you look at the old studs that appeared back in that time, you can also see where man's modernization comes over to the steel studs. The ceiling, as you see above here, originally was a pressed metal ceiling, which was curved around the sides where the walls go up to meet the roof itself. You can see where the wood fillets, the original wood fillets are, so when the wall will go up and curve. All this will be put back as it was then with the same decoration along the side, except the ceiling that was originally there was a metal material, which to me I would call like sheet metal or tin-ish type material, which we could not salvage due to the many years. And don't forget, this was a very hostile environment, being on an island, dealing with the mills back in those days, and all those elements acting against it. We couldn't salvage it, so they have found the original pattern. So the ceiling will be replaced with the same pattern, so you won't be able to tell the difference.
The wall was straight in the back where it had been brought out forward. So now we're able to move that wall back. And so you get the full squareness of the room in the original courtroom. So it truly is going to be closer to history than it ever has been, since we don't know when the wall was moved forward. The original bench will come back, which now is out at the temporary court facility. The paneling that goes up behind the bench is against the wall here, and that will be put back. So this courtroom will go back to look just like it did, except the wall will be further back and the ceiling will be like it should be. The millwork in this courtroom is beautiful, and of course now it's covered with dust during the construction period, but when they clean it up it's going to be spectacular. And the jury box, of course, is against the wall along with the panel that goes behind it. So the original furniture that was in here, the tables for the attorneys, that will all come back from the temporary facility. The old lawyer bookcases will come back. All of those things will be back in the courtroom, so it'll be very historic in nature.
The people who worked on that courthouse originally, I don't know where they were from or whatever, but they were very, very skilled people. And just nothing's built like that anymore. So I think it's really great that that somebody's taken the time to make sure that it's done properly.
To know that we were able to restore it and do enough work on that courthouse to continue it and keep it operating and have it continue to be the second oldest has meant an awful lot. I think we have the commitment from our elected officials and from our community to continue that.
I think everybody will be so pleased to see it functioning.
Oh, it'll be wonderful. It'll be wonderful. Working in that courthouse is just a delight. And one of the delights, which didn't have anything to do with your work, is the fact that you are in the middle of the community. You can literally look out your window and see the citizens of this community go about their daily affairs. You can walk outside and even if you have 5 minutes, take a walk downtown and see people and say hello to them. I think it establishes a rapport between the judiciary and the citizens of this community that you don't get in many places, because most courthouses aren't in the heart of downtown.
The courthouse is the heart of the community. And I really believe that when the courthouse is opened again, the people will be back. I think it'll help the whole community.
It'll be a day I'll be proud of. You know, to know that I've been a part of keeping that building continuing on into the next century.
You know, when we finally got the building to a point that we could open it, not for operation, but a point that we could open it to the citizens of the county and let them see what we had done and what we were about to finish, you know, that's a day you have to be proud of, because you realize, I think, during that time that you didn't do it for yourself. Those of us who live in the courthouse, Ms. Miller, myself, the judges, we didn't do it for ourselves. We did it because it belongs to the people.
This courthouse has meant so much to my whole family. All through the years, we've been associated with it. The day they took everything out of the courthouse is one of the saddest days of my life. And they promised us that that would be only a very temporary thing while they renovated the interior. And that was, how many years ago? At least 5, maybe 7. Long time ago. And now I'm just so thankful that it turned out so well.
What left when the judiciary left, when all of the functions that drew people downtown left, was its heart. We've got it back again. This is an example of a restoration that helped to restore a community spirit.
They have been fighting over keeping this wonderful courthouse for many years, and it's finally the way it's supposed to be. And this is really wonderful to have it all restored again.
The hair's standing up on the back of my neck right now. I mean, I'm just so proud of it. And I hope all the citizens enjoy the courthouse in the future.
It was wonderful. And to see him speak on the front of it again in a good capacity and in a great situation, the turnout that was here is wonderful. And just to see the work that's been done. I know we've still got a ways to go. They say 2 weeks, I guess, but it doesn't matter. Just the fact that it's been done, it'll continue on. It's part of our history, and this is it. This is our cornerstone right here, so it's great to see it.
I never understood what all the problem was, but there should never have been any question that it belonged here forever.
To begin the restoration and to start work on the building was more of saving the building at the time. The initial thought, was let's do this before it's too late. Because the building did sit fallow after we moved out for about 2 years before we started the restoration. So we were really in a push to make sure that everything got started and we saved the building and did the right thing. After that, as we got into that, I think that's when it became evident that we were doing this to be able to give this building back to the citizens and let them be able to use it. It was, a gift to the community. It was a great time, a great feeling in my heart. I know it was in Miss Miller's heart. All of us, we just felt like we'd finally done something good for our people. And besides preserving their building, we gave them the use of the building. And that's where I think we called it the gift to the people. Not by a long shot is it done. The cost of maintaining a second court facility, and especially an historic structure, which requires extra money and attention, is going to become expensive one day. And that's when people like myself that are committed to the building will have to fight for it. The building should always be used as a courthouse. Will it serve as the courthouse? It can't. It would tear the building up if we tried to do that. But it can certainly serve as the center of our government and of our court system. And I think that's going to be the challenge to that in the future. The other challenge is developing new people that move here, or children, and developing that same spirit in them so that will continue after those of us who are starting to get older, are going to go away, and that happens one day too. Somebody else has to pick up that banner and run with it and understand the value of the building, what it's worth to the community, and where it has to serve, and it has to stand forever.